Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to start by reading the following note. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can you please raise your hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could you turn the camera on to indicate that or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure their microphone and camera is on to ensure they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and or democratic officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chair or democratic officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when addressing the committee, then let the chair or democratic officer know. This is our first hybrid meeting as a committee, so everything will go well, I'm sure, but if there's any technical glitches, then bear with us. Get started with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. So I've received them from Councillor Penn, Rebecca Morteo, Jamie Clement and Lucy Barraclough. Are there any other apologies? Rhys Goodjohn.
Yep, apologies for Alice Emerson.
Thank you, Rhys. Councillor Payne.
Apologies, Chair. I do have to leave at 7:10. I have a prior engagement.
Thank you, Helen. I can't see any others, so we'll move to agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on 9th November 2023. If anyone has any thoughts or queries. If not, then I move we approve those minutes. We have a seconder. Councillor Payne.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy.
And I'm definitely not Councillor Payne.
Councillor Payne flashed up on the screen at the same time. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interest, including whipping declarations.
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 4. I'm a governor at St Helens Catholic School.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll move.
If I may, Chair, can I just clarify the nature of the interest and whether it's personal or prejudicial, please?
Yeah, it's a personal one and not a prejudicial. And under the Members' Code of Conduct, I'm entitled to vote and speak.
Yes, that's
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. We'll move on to agenda item 4, presentation from the Central South Consortium. Caris Pritchard gives her apologies for this evening, so it's over to Natalie.
Good evening, everybody, and like you said, apologies for Caris and apologies for my voice. Hopefully you can hear me enough. I'm not going to talk for very long. I just wanted to remind you of us attending. So as CSE over the last 2.5 years, I've been invited to scrutiny meetings for a termly presentation on curriculum for Wales, and thank you for your invite again this evening. We've presented on how schools have been planning and designing their curriculum, and we've heard directly from schools outlining their planning and particularly how they're working on some new areas of the curriculum and with their clusters. We've also had a number of presentations along particular themes with Curriculum for Wales. So today our theme is international languages, and I'd like to invite my colleague Marina Sayers-Leku to introduce herself and to talk as the Associate Advisor for International Languages on the work we've been doing in CSE to support schools. And then we do have some videos from schools within the local authority on their practice and emerging practice to date. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marina Sayers-Leku. I just want to start by thanking everybody for the invitation to come today to the scrutiny meeting and to talk about international languages. I am originally from the Basque Country in northern Spain, which is a bilingual region with lots of links to Wales. And I have a background in primary and languages. And I was very excited to come into the job as an advisor because I have been involved in curriculum building with primary schools for many years. And now I can be involved more proactively into helping schools build curriculum for international languages. I've just asked request to share screen. Which is better for you because otherwise you have to deal with my winter face. It's probably better if you just see the presentation instead. So I just wanted to start by saying how exciting it was for any of us who work in languages to see the to kind of welcome the new curriculum for Wales and how it gives the schools the opportunity to raise the profile of languages, and we're kind of sharing with those values and that vision to instill values of aspirations and empathy and just global thinking. So in this kind of purpose-led curriculum with the four purposes, which are the pillars in which we build curriculum in schools, where do languages fit in the curriculum? And learning languages inspires students to become multilingual, to develop an openness and curiosity about languages and cultures of the world. It develops knowledge of linguistic and cultural diversity. It develops their own sense of linguistic identity, and it gives the students the opportunity to celebrate languages and cultures, including their own languages and cultures if they speak other languages in their homes. And last but not least, it develops mutual respect and cohesion. So lots of opportunities for raising aspirations in global thinking and in language learning, but also where there are opportunities also bring some challenges. And just to give you some context, if you look on the left, you have some data from the latest Language Trends Wales survey from British Council Wales, and you'll see how there is a decrease year on year in the uptake of languages in secondary school, which is leading to a deficit in language skills in Wales. And the new curriculum is giving the chance to students to start languages earlier on in primary, opportunities to build confidence and enjoyment, and to make sure that the languages are the new normal subject in school and not just an add-on that you start late in life and that we don't really pay much attention to. So as part of this effort, we are part of the Global Futures institution, which is led by Welsh Government and which aims to support multilingualism in schools and increase the number of learners. And how do we achieve these aims, these strategic aims to develop and to increase the number of language learners in schools? Well, you'll be glad to know that the schools are not alone in achieving this, because we support the schools at CSC, but we also actively support and promote institutions that support the schools. And I'll give you a few examples there, but I just wanted to highlight two that are having a very positive impact in the schools in the region. One is the MFL mentoring program in secondary schools, which is led by the universities, the Welsh universities. And these are mentors that deliver workshops for children in year 7 to year 8 and 9. And then the Certhiaeth program by British Council, which teaches primary school teachers how to teach languages through music. And also I wanted to quickly mention the Languages Connect Us, which is a very exciting part of the new curriculum. And it's an area of the curriculum that is the same for English, Welsh, and international languages. And we collaborate with the rest of the team at CSC by upskilling teachers in knowledge and understanding of connections between languages, etymology, translanguaging skills. In terms of how we support schools, we are actively involved in the upskilling of teachers. So we run language courses, and we also run language pedagogy workshops. All these courses for primary practitioners are very popular and are very, very effective in improving the confidence of non-specialist teachers in primary. So we kind of changing minds of practitioners around language learning, and we're also changing hearts and just getting them to go from I cannot learn another language to yes, you can learn the language and you can learn enough to teach it even. At the heart of this support is our offer of bespoke support to schools, both to individual schools and to clusters of schools. And what we do is we go into schools and we find out what it is that they need from us in order to develop and implement a successful language program. Helping us are a team of lead practitioners that come from the schools themselves. We have a team of secondary practitioners and primary practitioners that run the language courses, the network meetings, and they are available as a support network for schools that need that little bit extra. In terms of the support that we give to individual schools, so some schools would be very proactive and self-sufficient, they'll be very confident, and they will know what they want to achieve, and they're very independent in action planning for international languages. But some schools will need a little bit of guidance, and we take them through this journey of integrated languages. And generally speaking, schools choose one of two approaches, either a one language approach or a multiple language approach. For the one language approach, generally speaking, French and Spanish are the most popular languages. For multiple languages, we see also the presence of German, Italian, and Arabic. I'm very glad to be showing you in a minute the work of St. Helens as a one language approach and Sully as a multiple language approach, because they will explain to you directly the rationale behind choosing those languages and the benefits of their approaches. We also have a strong presence in inset meetings, and we deliver training around which knowledge and skills and experiences they should be developing in students. We address misconceptions, and we trying to think that we diminish that fear around language teaching, and so that teachers understand what is it they need to know in order to deliver lessons. We also support the design of bespoke schemes of learning, and we highlight the importance of delivering a curriculum that is based around the purpose of the language. So find out from teachers what context in the school is language used naturally for authentic purposes, and we then develop the language around those contexts, which is aligned with the Welsh continuum as well. So we support the Welsh continuum by aligning our curriculum with them. Finally, we provide fully resourced programs to non-specialist teachers to enable them to build progression on a 3 to 16 continuum, which is the vision for Curriculum for Wales for schools. And let me finish with a quote from Meredith Hopwood. The more languages we have, the more windows we have on the world. And just also to quote somebody that Meredith always quotes in her webinars, which is German writer Goethe, thinking about how the Curriculum for Wales speaks about a bilingual Wales that is ready to engage in a multilingual world. It's like Goethe said, is giving learners roots to grow and wings to fly. And I'm gonna go straight on to presenting from our colleague Joe Evans at St. Helens, where they have a one language approach and their language of choice is Spanish.
Marina, just to double check, I'm not sure we're getting any audio at the moment from you on that presentation. Are you able to
Okay.
That's okay. Would you mind closing down the previous window and screen sharing again for us?
Sure, I'll do that now. Thank you for letting me know quickly.
That's okay.
I'll change the screen and I'll go into the meeting.
I've been covering these topics that you can
Let me
see
start
highlighted
again.
here. As
Okay,
you
we
can
are
see,
getting
we-
audio. Would you mind restarting it for us?
Not at all.
Señores y señoras, me alegra
Better?
presentarles el impacto positivo que los idiomas internacionales han tenido en
That's
nuestra
fine,
comunidad.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're delighted to present to you the positive impact that international languages have had in our school.
I'm sorry, Marina, it seems to have stopped. Has it paused at your
Yes.
end?
It's a stop for me as well. Let me start again.
Okay.
Activity. Why have we chosen Spanish? Spanish is our chosen language as we're a feeder to St. Richard Gwyn, where Spanish is the international language that is taught. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker and international language teacher. Currently in foundation phase, we have been covering these topics that you can see highlighted here. As you can see, we use a oracy-based approach and we use songs to reinforce and recall language, which the children really enjoy and find engaging. I use puppets to help in my teaching because I find the children really enjoy that interaction. In terms of topics that are coming up, we will be looking at farm animals and also ice cream flavors, which the children really will enjoy. In terms of Key Stage 2, we've covered a range of topics. Our approach is again oracy-based, but we also include writing. Our oracy-based approach encourages a lot of reinforcement and practice. We also have interactive quizzes and use Google Classroom reinforcement activities to reinforce the learning in class. We have a nice range of topics that are going to be coming up. The children will most likely enjoy these very much as they're very keen to learn language that they could use when they go away on holidays. In terms of the Conti EPI approach, this was training received through the Central South Consortium. Thank you, Marina. I created a module on the topic of pets, or incorporating the Mars and ears sequencing. Resources that were created included detailed teaching plans, PowerPoints, a teacher guide and notes, including set instructions. The aim was to create something which anybody could use, even if their language knowledge of Spanish was very, very minimal. We also had to create resources that demonstrated translanguaging and plurilingualism, as well as cross-curricular links. The EPI approach has been highly successful with an improved language recall, and we will continue applying this methodology in our language teaching throughout school. Here we can see evidence of the work of our EPI approach activities. In the top left, you can see a reading and translation exercise, a written exercise, listening and translanguaging activity, which incorporates Welsh, English and Spanish. Our pupil feedback in foundation phase is highly positive. The children's language learning has progressed since we started Spanish, and they are thoroughly enjoying their language learning. In Key Stage 2, we can see again the progression from 22-23 to this term. Pets and classroom objects is a new topic this term, hence why we have only one bar chart demonstrating, but you can see that the language recall and confidence is extremely high. Our Eston inspection was highly positive in terms of our feedback for Spanish. The inspectors were pleased to see and observe teachers observing high quality second language learning, which has an impact on pupil enthusiasm and engagement in particular. In terms of other extra bits of information regarding our teaching practice, we have a Spanish Star weekly certificate, which is highly looked forward to. The children get very, very excited about it, and it just reinforces their hard work and efforts. We also incorporate the physical, linguistic, cognitive skills and social emotions as shown through the programme of Voice 21. A step forward include continue to work closely with the CSC International Languages team. to carry out the British Council Language Challenge, create links partnerships with schools abroad, for example, e-twinning, and create links with other schools in South Wales to ensure good practice in the field of international languages and to continue building our curriculum. Finishing off, why our pupils love learning languages. They find it really fun, they find it really interesting, they like learning about Spain as well as also South America. They like the idea of being able to communicate with others, and they really enjoy the lessons as they're really interactive and everyone has a go. We would be delighted if you would like to see our languages in action. Thank you for listening, and I hope you can see how important languages are to this age group and how useful it will be to them in their future education. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm gonna go and change screen now. So you can let me know if you can hear it, please. And this is from Sally Primary that has a multiple language approach.
I'm going to be giving you a brief
Thank you,
5-minute
Marina.
how we've
Thank
been
you.
developing international languages in our school. So our approach to teaching international languages is based around 3 big ideas. First one being translanguaging. Using this approach, what we want to do is to give our pupils the opportunity to look for links between languages. This means that we take on a multi-language approach within our school. So children, as they move through Sully, will have the opportunity to learn several different languages, and this really gives them the opportunity to build on their language skills. So having had discussions with our secondary colleagues, they didn't think it was necessary for us as a primary school to pick one language and stick with it so that the pupils kind of made progress in that language. What they really wanted us to do was to infuse children about language learning so that when they get to secondary school, they've got more of those sort of skills that will enable them to pick up language learning a lot more quickly. So translanguaging not only makes use of the formal opportunities to look at links between languages and learn language patterns, it also makes use of languages that are already spoken by a pupil body, and these may be languages that they speak with grandparents or other members of the community. So yeah, that being said, we have an approach that takes tries to develop our pupils' skills, but also really looks at language as part of culture. So how we can use language and how language celebrates culture and how language is intertwined with kind of global perspectives as well. So yeah, and equally we think that language has a huge part to play in children developing that sense of identity and belonging. And within this sort of big idea, we are very keen to celebrate diversity within our community. So that's language diversity as well as cultural diversity. And for us, that really feels like when we're celebrating Wales, we're looking at a modern Wales, a diverse Wales, where people do come from different countries and speak different languages. And we really want our children to recognise that their identity as being part of a modern Wales, but also celebrating their kind of own cultural identities. So I'll just briefly run through sort of the overview of how our curriculum is set up. So yeah, translanguage is at the heart. We want our children to be exposed to lots of different languages as they move through our school. We plan our curriculum around the rights for the child and the global goals. And language teaching is carried out by classroom teachers, but also we do have specialist teachers who come in. So I'll just briefly go over some other ideas. So we have the International Schools Award. We were given this in 2015. So we are very keen to incorporate international dimensions within Sully Primary School. We're lucky enough to have a Chinese language assistant who comes in to teach our children not only Mandarin, but teach them about Chinese culture as well. We have good connections with our secondary colleagues at St Cyrus and Stanwell, where the majority of our pupils go. Every year we hold an international week where parents are invited in to look at the work that children have done, not just about language, but about culture. Our pupils have had and teachers have had great opportunities to travel as well to places such as Romania and Bulgaria and take part in lots of projects as well. We have developed our use of clubs. So these are clubs where children can go during their lunchtime, and these are really popular with our children. You can see that they want to spend some of their spare time learning a language, and that really for us is at the heart of what we do in Sully, where we want language learning to be something that children are enthusiastic about. Last year we were involved in an amazing project with the British Council using the Cerff Iaith resources, and Cerff Iaith is an amazing website which uses song and music to embed language learning within schools. So this culminated in an amazing event at the Wales Millennium Centre, where our Year 6 pupils were able to sing in, I think, 3 or 4 different languages, songs that these translanguaging songs with an orchestra. So it was an amazing opportunity for them, and we're now using Cerff Iaith on a weekly basis, where our progression steps get together and they have a singing assembly based on some of the resources on the Cerff Iaith website. So that was a massive success, and I know it had a huge impact on the pupils who took part in that. So benefits, increased confidence. We want our children to, learning a language can bring out a huge amount of, self-confidence, especially if children are bringing their own sort of experiences to it as well. We really want to develop this idea of Wales as being part of a wider world, especially looking at what modern Wales actually looks like for our children. This idea that through language learning, we're broadening their horizon, and we're hopeful that this will continue to encourage our children to be respectful and tolerant of each other, which for us is really what the Curriculum for Wales is all about. So just briefly, look into the future. We're going to continue. We're really excited about using Cerff Iaith to embrace this translanguaging approach. We're going to keep, we're continuing to introduce that third language, so English, Welsh, and another from a very early age. Like we said, this for us is all about making the most of the opportunities afforded to us as a primary school to really get children enthusiastic about language learning. So that's what we do here at Sully Primary School. Thank you for listening, and hope you have a nice evening.
Okay, I'm glad we finished with that, because I was there in that concert where Sully Primary participated, singing a few multilingual songs. One of them, Tango Tango, got everybody up and dancing. So children in Vale of Glamorgan really make you proud, and they are so confident in their language skills. Like a lesson for all of us to learn, I think. Thank you very much, Diolch o galon.
Thank you. Marina, do councillors have any questions or thoughts? Oh, sorry, Natalie.
I was just ready if anybody had any questions to ask.
Excellent. Very good. Councillor Payne.
Gracias, Marina. Mi llamo Helen. Good evening. Thank you for that. That was brilliant. I love languages. Not very good at them, but I still like them. So this is a brilliant opportunity to look at multilingual work, and kind of from my perspective, I'd like to see more. So are there going to be any events, any joint events? We're looking at the consortium point of view, really. So is there anything that we could put on to promote this? That's kind of to both of you, really.
Thank you for the question. I would love to put on more events. Obviously, there are budgetary restrictions, but I'm always looking for opportunities to celebrate. I think this is the important part of this journey, is to celebrate what we've achieved together, particularly because many schools are putting so much time and effort into taking the children to this journey. So the answer is yes, I'm hoping that we will have more. And please, if you have any ideas where there might be resources that we can tap into, let me know, because I would be 100% in favor, and I will support you all the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen Gillane.
Apologies. Hi there. I was just wondering what the work is being done or what provision there is for children wishing to take, this is more for secondary really, wishing to take GCSEs or A-levels in languages that are not commonly being taught in schools. I know a few years ago they were being offered. Is that still the case?
So the short answer is schools can enter students to do GCSE in other languages, but normally they enter them, but they don't have provision to prepare them for them if they don't have a teacher in sight. So normally it's the community they come from that they help them prepare them. If you have questions about any particular languages, I can find out for you where the support is. But yes, there is still, if you look at the data, there are a few languages there for instead of GCSE entries other than French, Spanish, and German every year. So there is provision out there, and it's normally privately funded, but the schools can enter them.
Okay. I mean, it was a personal question, but I'm also wondering because maybe it's not a very well-known thing that the languages that children sometimes speak at home, they can earn qualifications in those languages to recognise that they are proficient in those.
Yeah, I mean, like Marina said, that is available for schools. So we can certainly remind schools of that, and we can pop that in our school bulletin. We don't have direct communications with parents or pupils as such through our means, but we can certainly remind schools of their ability to enter children into those qualifications through the school, although, like Marina said, the teaching is not done at the school.
No.
We can certainly remind them of that case, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, thanks for the presentations. It's really, really helpful. And I really like the two different variants from the two different schools, you know, when focusing on one language and when actually just multi-language. It's interesting for me coming from previously as a teacher in London, where obviously there wasn't Welsh within the curriculum, to see how actually I think it's probably supporting schools in that children are used to learning languages. So I really just wanted to say thank you. I previously taught English abroad, and it's really good to see actually just the enthusiasm, because in learning any language, you've got to have that enthusiasm in order to allow children to enjoy it, so that they're not nervous. And well done.
Thank you, Naomi. Ghislaine, is that a legacy, or would you like to come back in? Okay, great. If there are no other questions or queries, thank you very much for the presentation. So I move that we note the presentation and thank our contributors and congratulate them for the work they're doing. If anyone would like to second.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hennessy. Moving on to agenda item 5, refresh of the medium-term financial plan 24-25 to 28-29. Gemma and Vicky.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I have got some slides to share to support the presentation, and apologies, some members will have seen these slides a few times before, so apologies for that. Unfortunately, the messages don't get any more cheerful. So this is a reference from Cabinet on the 16th of November. Yeah, I'm ready, thank you. On the 16th of November, and it sets out the refresh position and updated for where departments have submitted their cost pressures. So just to set out where we are in terms of the budget planning cycle, obviously we brought the rolled forward financial strategy back in July to Cabinet, which came to Scrutiny Committee in September. This report now is in the review and refresh element of this budget planning cycle, although in the background, directorates are working to identify potential savings and transformation initiatives to help close the funding gap that we'll come on to in the next slide. We'll be bringing initial proposals in January following that provisional settlement from Welsh Government on the 19th of December, and then with a view to setting an approved budget by that statutory deadline on the 11th of March. As you'll be aware, we're setting the budget within a broad financial strategy, so trying to make sure that we continue to deliver the corporate plan. There's a really key message that will be relevant to this scrutiny committee around ensuring that we focus on supporting the most vulnerable. We need to develop sustainable finances, so we need to try and identify ways to have a balanced budget over that medium-term financial plan period. So not just identifying strategies to close the gap for 24-25, but also strategies that we're working on for future years as well. Looking to maintain an appropriate level of reserves. Generating local tax revenue is proposed to be part of that picture. We'll be bringing a fees and charges report in January. And it's really important to pull out that obviously that collective responsibility to manage the finances of the council and try and make sure that they're as accessible and transparent as possible. So this next slide just gives you an overview of the overall position, but I will try and draw out some messages that are relevant to this scrutiny committee. So in terms of the government grant funding, that assumes the 3% increase that we were advised of as part of the settlement in for 23-24. The council tax assumes a 4.9% increase, but obviously the increase that is eventual will be a policy decision. There is some further work that we will be doing to feed into the January settlement around what the council tax base is, what the collection rate is that could vary that figure. But we're going with a broad additional funding figure of around 10 million for 24-25 at this stage. In terms of the cost pressures that are set out here, the original list of cost pressures that we had from directorates following that update was around £38 million. Now, one of the criticisms of our approach to budgets in the past is that we then come in January with a magic figure that's far less than that. So what we've tried to do is that robust review of cost pressures at this stage, because clearly we can't identify £28 million worth of savings to try and close that funding gap. And some of that review of cost pressures has meant that, for instance, certain directorates have had no cost pressures allocated, and there has been, for instance, around pay pressures, an assumption that only 75% of those pay pressures will be funded. So there is a kind of inbuilt saving assumed as part of these cost pressures, which directorates need to work to mitigate. And we're asking directors to feed in those mitigation proposals over the next few weeks so we can feed that into the January report. So we're left here with a funding gap of around 10.5 million for 24-25, and obviously some funding gaps also in future years. There are a number of levers that we can utilise to try and close that funding gap, and I talked about some of them around looking at the council tax base. But also it might be that we benefit from some population increase, which we have in the past given some of the development within the Vale. So we are looking at savings of around 7.5 million at the moment. This is a figure that we're working towards, but we're obviously working with the assumption that, for instance, schools potentially wouldn't be able to identify savings, and we'd need to offer a slightly lower level of savings in areas such as social services and schools where education, where we're dealing with these significant pressures. So moving on to the next slide, in terms of next steps, so obviously we've received the UK government budget and we didn't have particularly good news in terms of any consequentials that might be coming through, but those figures are now being worked through Welsh Government and we'll be looking for the provisional settlement on the 19th of December. We're bringing a budget for consultation in January, and that will feed in the savings proposals and transformation proposals that directorates are working on, a further review of cost pressures following this consultation. And obviously we're speaking to other forums as well. So we've met with budget forum governors in recent days as well. So those conversations will always also be feeding into that report. This will then come for public consultation, scrutiny consultation between January and mid-February, and the draft budget will be brought at the end of February with a view to setting the budget by the 11th of March. Those are the key points I was going to draw up, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Gemma. So over to councillors if there are any questions or thoughts. I'm getting used to the system still. Nothing's popping up on the screen, but I just wondered about the obviously local government settlement in late December. Things will be clear after that. Are you working on any assumptions with that? Any potential numbers in mind, or what are your thoughts on that?
Chair, I think our current thinking is that there are poor expectation for an improved settlement over and above the 3% that we've built in as part of the budget proposals. So we're not expecting any upside other than, as I said, something potentially around some of the population demographics that might work through the funding. We are hopeful, at particular to the scrutiny committee, there are changes around teachers' pension that will be taking effect in next financial year, and our expectation is that that funding is going to be passported by UK government. And so it might be that we see that as part of the settlement. It might be that is handled in a slightly different way, but that's something that we'll be looking for a bit more information about in the coming months as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, just a quick question, Gemma. Are you expecting, you're saying you're not expecting to get an awful lot of money from Welsh Government at all. So if that's the case, are we looking at not helping any schools who are in the red at all with any extra funding?
Chair, through you. So there are cost pressures allocated to schools as part of these proposals. There are pressures for some demographic pressures within special schools. There are cost pressures towards the pay award, although it's not the full amount of the pay award. And there are also cost pressures being awarded to schools for growth in the ALN sector, although it's not the full amount that's being requested. So there are cost pressures being awarded, and the increase that we're forecasting for schools is over and above the 3% that we would expect to see in the grant increase for the council. But it's not the full level of pressures that are being set out by education on behalf of schools at the moment, and that's because there's such a significant funding gap between all the pressures that are being put forward by the council and the likely available funding and the savings that are felt to be achievable within the time frame.
Okay, and my second question, if you don't mind, can you tell me how much school transport is over budget by it currently?
I think it's in the region of just over 600,000. And that's across a number of sectors. That's across the primary sector, the secondary special and ALN. So we know that there are specific pressures around ALN because we're seeing that increase in pupils going into special schools, for instance, but we do also have pressures in the secondary and the primary sector. And that's partly due to an increase in the number of pupils that are being transported across the Vale. But also, as we've talked about in scrutiny before, there are specific market conditions in terms of supply that is also affecting the price of those transport arrangements.
Okay, thanks, Gemma.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Any other questions? No, thank you, Gemma, for that. So I move that we note the medium-term financial plan. If I could have a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Moving on to agenda item 6, Corporate Safeguarding Summary Report. Jason Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. This report is referenced from Cabinet on the 16th of November. It is, as I said, the midterm report. If I just give you some of the main headlines for the report. Obviously, we refer to all the scrutiny committees. The key issues, obviously, consideration are the corporate safeguarding group continues to meet on a quarterly basis with a full focus on the strategic overview for safeguarding across the local authority. There's been a lot of work around the development of a suite of safeguarding data within the business intelligence tools, which is moving towards across directorates to monitor such things as safer recruitment and training levels, along as referrals within children's services as well. So this really is monitoring key activity really well, but it's developing well. There's been a review of safeguarding training and accompanying materials have been completed as well. And the council IDEB system now provides that mechanism to deliver safeguarding training across schools as well, and it gives the added facility of reminders for staff and monitoring completion as well for managers for all the mandatory and courses that are there for staff. There has also been the commission of a working group has developed a focus on areas of learning from reviews from the regional safeguarding board, progressing developments in our response to audit and consider any wider quality assurance that can support the work of the corporate safeguarding group as well. And as I said, with the regional safeguarding board and their priorities, they've also been shared with members of the corporate safeguarding group, and any practice reviews that have been published are looked at, and learning has been taken, gets noted by the corporate safeguarding group to be cascaded across the authority. Safer recruitment, that data is regularly reported to the corporate safeguarding group. We obviously with any areas of note being actioned and discussed, and that is monitored also monitored on a monthly basis within learning and skills for our schools and directorate as well. So those are the main headlines, Chair, of that report. Obviously, I think the annual report came to Cabinet and to scrutiny late in the year, and so there's only been a couple of months since the initial main update. So there's not a lot more to report to you this time.
Great, many thanks, Jason. So over to councillors if there's any questions or queries. Councillor Hennessy.
I just have one question. It was brought up at a committee meeting last night. Do you believe safeguarding should be made compulsory for all governors?
As a safeguarding officer within learning skills, I think it would be a very good idea. That's something that gets discussed at corporate safeguarding group, along with, I'd suggest that data barring checks should also be perhaps compulsory for governors, but there's not a legal position on that at the moment. That's something that we are encouraging, and if I can give assurance for within learning skills, we deliver safeguarding training to all designated safeguarding governors, and at this time of our 54 designated safeguarding governors, 49 of them have received training in the last 12 months. Because I think that role is key on the governing body, and in addition to that, Chair, all other governors on governing bodies are offered online hub training, which gives that introduction to safeguarding, which is monitored by individual schools. And we really, from a safeguarding perspective, we really encourage the governors to complete that training. But at this time, I'd welcome it to be mandatory, but obviously it's not something I can necessarily influence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Jason? Then I can see, so thank you for that, Jason. So I move that we note that report. If I could have a seconder for that.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Moving on to agenda item 7, Q2 revenue monitoring 23-24, and it's over to Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. Amy, do you mind sharing the finance slides again, please? Thank you.
Okay, so this first slide shows the projected overall position for the council. So the revenue position for 23-24 continues to reflect challenging demand and inflationary pressures. The report also sets out unplanned use of reserves of £6.768 million and a further £6.5 million for schools. Okay, yeah, no problem. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay now? Okay. So the report sets out the revised budget, which strips out corporate recharges for office accommodation and services such as HR, legal, finance, and the contact centre. And these have previously been reported on the individual service lines, but is now being shown against the corporate resources line. So this will more clearly show the control around some of the spend, which will set us up well where we go forward and need to make further savings against those lines. So the council has identified a number of steps to be taken in year to help mitigate the emerging overspend. So firstly, tighter controls around non-essential expenditure and recruitment. The senior leadership team have reviewed the capital programme and we'll go through that in some more detail in the capital report. Senior leadership team have also reviewed the use of reserves, and all requests for use of these reserves are now routed through the Section 151 officer and the chief executive. And SLT have also have to determine savings to bring forward potentially into 23-24. Next slide, please. So emerging pressures for the council include increasing demand in respect of children and adult social care and significant increases in the cost of placements and care packages. Also, support for additional learning needs continues to be an area of significant pressure within learning and skills. The council is also experiencing continued inflationary pressures in respect of school transport. Across service, inflationary pressures are also being experienced in terms of pay. So some of these will be funded from reserves, and there is also some mitigation from policy underspends against borrowing and additional council tax surplus. So the delegated schools budget for 23-24 is projected to outturn with an overspend of 171k, and this is going to be funded from the general fund after transferring 7.55 million from reserves and a further 1.2 million planned as part of the 23-24 budget proposals to smooth emerging revenue pressures. So there are 22 schools at the moment that have submitted deficit budgets for 23-24 financial year, with a total deficit estimated at 2.7 million. So the regulations require that schools in a deficit position should submit a balanced recovery plan showing how the deficit will be eradicated over the next few years. At the moment, 19 schools have submitted non-recoverable budget deficits. So work will continue with the schools to try and achieve balanced budgets. A number of redundancies have been agreed in the school sector, and this is funded from the pay reserve. Unfunded pay awards also continue to increase the strain on school finances. So budget adjustments of 2.389 million are requested as part of this report. And as I said, that's to remove the impact of the corporate central recharges on the budget and more accurately reflect the controllable budget for the directorate. So this gives a revised budget for 23-24 of 128.289 million. The projected outturn for learning and skills in 23-24 is an adverse position of 621,000, which will need to be mitigated by additional savings identified in year or a drawdown from the services reserves, and you can find more information on that in Appendix A. So key pressures within the directorate include the reduction in out-of-county income for pupils from other local authorities attending special schools and resource basis, children's placements costs due to increasing numbers of placements and the increasing cost of those placements. And there's some linkage here with the increase we have seen in children's services around looked after children. Also, additional Welsh medium provision, so the establishment of a new Welsh medium resource base is being set up at Gwynant from September 23, and the existing provision at Whitmore resource base and Havant resource base is being increased. So schools were allocated an efficiency savings target of 2.75 million with the within the 23-24 delegated budget, and this was cut from schools' budget via their schools funding formula. The budget assumes 564k of efficiencies corporately. There is some shortfall on savings due to the timing around implementation. The shortfall will need to be met from reserves in the first instance, and this is reflected in the projected outturn. The final slide details the reserves position. So we can see a significant reduction in reserves. A lot of this is a planned reduction in reserves in terms of capital funding and also funding for the housing revenue account. But you can also see the column for the unplanned drawdown of reserves has significant pressures across the council as things currently stand at the moment. That's the report summarised, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Vicky. Any questions from councillors, please? Councillor Godfrey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Me? Yeah. Well, my question is, particularly with all the cost pressures, we all live in Wales, and I struggle to understand why we have Welsh medium schools and then A and other schools. Why have we not just got Welsh medium schools? Why have we got a duplication of Welsh medium and then just sort of A and other schools?
Hello, Councillor Godfrey. Sorry, Councillor, to interrupt you then.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could just possibly rephrase that question for us. We're not quite sure what you're asking of the finance officer. Would you mind?
Yeah, okay. Well, to quote as an example, in my ward, we've got Wenville Primary School, and there's a lot of parents over the years who've opted for their children to go to Welsh medium schools, which has necessitated them having to have transport provided every day. Now, Wenville Primary is perfectly good primary school, but these parents chose for their children to go to Welsh medium school. And I'm just wondering, we live in Wales, so why don't we just, all schools become Welsh medium schools per se, because we are in Wales, you know. I don't believe there's two alternatives in Scotland. There's just one sort of medium primary school and one high school. You know, I'm just wondering why we've got this dual standard in Wales.
Would be able to respond.
I apologise if I'm not coming.
Do you want me to come in on that really quickly? I guess the short answer is that's not something that's within our control within the local authority. So we have a number of different types of learning environments for our pupils. We have English medium, we have Welsh medium, we have faith-based schools, in addition to primary, secondary, nursery, all through. There are different models, for example. And there are a lot of legislation around the types of schools and how they operate that we need to follow. So it isn't really a question I can answer in this forum. I think that's a broader forum in terms of how education is structured for the country overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I quite understand where you come from, Trevor, but from my experience, the vast majority of pupils that go to Welsh medium, it necessitates them having to have transport because they live some distance away. So hence why that could be why there's such an overspend on transport.
I wouldn't put it down to the language factor. I mean, that is one facet. There are a number of different facets around that. For example, you know, for those pupils who have additional learning needs, there needs to be required transport to help them get into school for a number of different reasons. Public transport plays a big role in that as well. So there's a greater reliance on active travel and public transport. But as soon as you get past Barry, it becomes really difficult for people to use those to get to school on time to get home. One of the things we've been doing over the past few years and will continue to do going forward, so specifically in relation to Welsh medium education, is to make it more accessible. So we have a growth in Welsh medium schools, and there's a focus in some of the more rural areas going forward. And, you know, for example, that's something that we're looking to do in the coming years around secondary education for Welsh medium schools, so that there isn't as far to go to access that provision, and to make sure that pupils and families still have a choice in that. So there's a lot of different facets that contribute to the transport element, not just the nature or language of the school.
Thank you, Trevor and Russell. I can't see any other questions coming through. Would you like to switch yourself off, Russell, by the way? Thank you. So I've just got a question, Vicky. So there's a line, and you talked about the reserves quite a bit there, and it says the council is fortunate to have sizable reserves. Is there a sort of council-wide realisation that reserves are going to have to be dipped into quite a bit this year?
And Chair, I mean, I think there was some use of reserves as part of the budget strategy for 23-24, and we are seeing, I think, where in the past potentially we would say, well, we'll use this reserve if we aren't able to identify additional funding, and then we potentially be able to identify additional funding. We're not in that situation anymore. So I suppose the additional Welsh Government grant that we have seen in the past clearly isn't coming through in the same way. So it is likely that we're going to see that increase of use of service reserves, but also some of those risk-based reserves, so around the pay pressures reserve that we are using in year to offset some of those redundancies. And we obviously have some unplanned use of reserves as well in terms of cost pressures. So I think it's important that we some of that use of reserves is obviously linked to the capital programme. So where we see slippage on the capital programme, that would be delayed, but those reserves are still committed as part of the capital programme. So I think it's important that we maintain those risk reserves, though, as much as possible, because those risks will continue to be there for local authorities. So those risk reserves that are linked to legal claims, for instance, pay, energy pressures, some of the corporate landlord type risk. What we are seeing is a significant depletion around some of those service reserves. So, for instance, the social services reserve is completely used up based on our current projections in year. There is very little left in the neighbourhood services reserve, and reduction in around the learning and skills reserve as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or thoughts from councillors? No. Okay, so I move that we note the report and the position with regard to the authority's 23-24 revenue budget.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to agenda item 8, capital monitoring for the period April 1st to September 30th, 23. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. Amy, do you mind sharing the slides again, please? Thank you. Okay, so at the time of writing, the approved programme totaled just over 129 million. And if all the requests within the report to amend the capital programme are approved, the revised projected outturn is 107.6 million. So spend to the end of September was 25.6 million. So as it seems, there's significant spend still to come through. However, this is possible, especially with the large schemes like the Sustainable Communities for Learning schemes and the new build housing schemes. So schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends and slippage. And within this report, slippage of 18.8 million has been requested. And of that 18 million, 7.490 million is in relation to this scrutiny committee. So many areas are continuing to experience an increase in costs associated with the delivery of schemes, but officers continue to work with project managers and sponsors to ensure value for money and that all funding opportunities are fully explored. So Appendix 1 details the financial progress on the capital programme as at the 30th of September by scheme, and Appendix 2 sets out the directorates and the changes from the approved budget at the final proposals, showing the movements in year, including slippages and additions, and then demonstrates the journey to the revised forecast outturn that we're projecting at the moment. So due to the current financial situation, the Council's capital programme has undergone a review. And the report requests changes that will release a total of 5.545 million of funding back into the Council's reserves, capital receipts and other sources of capital funding. And this is to ensure that our finances are more sustainable and that the capital programme is deliverable. The review also proposes to remove some uncommitted schemes and via funding to help mitigate future years' revenue pressures. So for this scrutiny committee, there were 4 schemes that have been removed, and that was 125k for eternal elevations, repairs and renewals, 60k for Yscol St Curig lighting renewal, 30k for Holton Primary window refurbishment. And of those 3 schemes, these will be prioritised in the future amongst all the other education pressures when next year's asset renewal allocation is being allocated. The 4th that was removed was the Yscol St Barrack internal adaptations for Yscol Derry temporary accommodation, and that's just because that was originally being internally funded. However, we've now been able to fund that scheme from the additional learning needs grant, so that's been fully funded by grant funding. So there are 5 requests within the remit of this scrutiny committee within the report. So the first request is to bring forward budget from the 24-25 capital programme for the Centre of Learning and Wellbeing scheme, and that's because the scheme is anticipated to complete this financial year. There's a small 4k environment of budget from the Victorian Schools General Maintenance Scheme to the Additional Learning Needs Scheme for additional works required at Jenner Park Primary. Last year we had a scheme of Gwenbow roof renewal, and that budget just needs to be increased in this year to finalise the account. And the 4th is to include a new scheme for works to Pendoylan Primary in relation to a boundary wall. And lastly, we requested to reprofile the Band B Yscol Derry scheme within the 23-24 to the 25-26 capital programme. We just reprofiled it over those financial years. So that summarises the capital monitoring report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Vicky. Over to councillors for any questions. Doesn't look like it was a very comprehensive presentation. Okay, yeah. So if there are no questions, so I move that we note the 3 recommendations, which includes noting the progress made on delivering the capital programme, the use of emergency powers within the remit of the committee, and the changes to the 23-24 and future years capital programme.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Thank you, Vicky. So moving to the final agenda item of the evening, number 9, the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q2 performance 23-24.
I think you've got me for that one, Chair.
Yeah, hi, Trevor.
Hi. Right, let me just pull it up here. So folks will be familiar with this report. This is our progress report for Q2, so that's from April up to the end of September, looking at how we're doing towards some of the objectives outlined in the annual development plan and the corporate wellbeing objectives. One thing to note, I suppose, is the format of this report is a little bit different this time around. Essentially, to provide support to the corporate performance team, given some challenges and capacity there, as we're all sort of experiencing at the moment. In your packs, there's details, and it's broken down in terms of what we've achieved, our areas for improvement, areas for development, and areas of concern. And then that's mapped against our 4 wellbeing objectives. What I'll do, rather than go through them point by point, if you'll indulge me, I'll pull out some of the key pieces of work as we go through the different areas. So in terms of what we've achieved under Objective 1, so working with and for our communities, there's a couple there to highlight. So one, for example, for Q2, we've achieved digital inclusion accreditation towards our adult learning provider, and we were the first one in Wales to do so. So that's something to be really proud of. A number of our schools have achieved their awards in Gymraeg Campus, bronze and silver awards. That's both for English medium and Welsh medium schools, which is really positive. We've got some notes there in terms of some of the successes around our community libraries. So we help support our community libraries, and they've done an amazing piece of work around dementia-friendly status. So in St. Athan, for example, and Roos and Lanswit are also looking at, well, they have run housing advice sessions for over 55, which has been great. In terms of Objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, there's reference in there around some of the resource bases we're looking to put in, specifically the one that's proposed as part of the new build at Yallow. We've been working with other folks across the council in terms of maximising what we're able to do with the Shared Prosperity Fund. So there's some detail in there yielding some of the engagement programs we've done with young people, those with learning difficulties, to help them gain qualification skills, support for job seeking, that kind of stuff. There's also reference in terms of schools working with our partners for the whole school approach to mental health and well-being. So you would have heard a lot of this in some of the reports we've done previously. Obviously, this is a key area of focus and a critical aspect that we help with our schools. And we've got just under 80% of schools progressing as part of their implementation plan at the moment. And there's some really good figures in there as well around our NEET data. So NEET is not an education, employment or training. And there's references there to some of the progress we've made for Tier 1. Our ranking in Wales has gone from 12th to 5th, and from Tier 2 from 12th to 1st. So that's amazing achievement for those teams. Objective 3, supporting people at home and in their community. The first one there is around the rollout of universal primary free school meals. We were the first local authority in Wales to do so for all of our year groups, and we were for quite some time. This represents a savings of about £450 per child for families during a cost of living crisis, and make sure that those kids have access to free food. So that's something we're especially proud of. There's reference on there as well about the work that some of our schools are doing. So our schools play an active role in a number of different ways around healthy eating and food and access to food. So there's reference there to the community cafe that's been set up at Halton Primary, and this is a model that we've seen in lots of other schools. Caxton, Jenner, for example, are all doing something similar, as well as a number of other schools across the Vale, which is basically allowing folks to access food at discounted prices or pay-as-you-feel model, and to also access other critical products like period dignity supplies at their leisure. So that's been really positive. There's also reference in there in terms of some of the support that our schools have been doing around meeting the needs of asylum seekers and refugee learners, which has been really, really well received, and we've had quite a lot of impact through our schools on that. Under Objective 4, so respect, enhance and enjoy our environment, a lot of this is linked to the work around Project Zero. So there's reference to some of the work that our schools are doing. So we have the Eco School program, which aligns with Project Zero and looks towards decarbonisation and recycling. There's reference in there around the work of the Sustainable Communities for Learning team and some of the initiatives that they're doing at the moment. For example, the Spark pilot, which basically gives them the ability to assess and monitor energy usage in schools. That's something that we need to improve on to help the schools become more efficient. And then there's reference at the bottom as well in terms of the work that we've done within arts and culture and library services with a number of courses and workshops that have been run. So within Arts Central, the Pavilion and our library is linked to the Net Zero Carbon Agenda as well. The next section for areas of improvement, under Objective 1, there's reference to a piece of work that's underway around the special schools funding formula. So just to be clear, this doesn't create any more money in the system, but what it does is make sure that, one, everybody has a clear understanding of how the formula works for the sector, and two, to make sure it has the most up-to-date and relevant information from what we can control to make sure it is as fair as possible. So that's a key piece of work that's going on at the moment. As well, there's a lot of work around community-focused schools, and there's loads of examples of some of the work that not just schools individually, but as a cluster are doing in supporting their local communities. And some of that work is supported with the funding we get through Sustainable Communities for Learning and the partnerships we have with some of our builders. Under Objective 2, there's reference there. There's one reference, and it's towards Ysgolori YYD, which is the expansion project. So the special school sector, as you've heard, is under immense pressure, and growth is exponential in terms of the needs and the complexity of needs for our kids who need to access its services. So this is a key piece of work in terms of creating new provision for them. Sorry, I just got booted out. Can you hear?
You're back
Can you hear me
now,
okay?
thankfully, Trevor. Yeah.
Okay. The system got bored of me. Sorry, I'm almost done. Objective 3 under that area, so that's looking at some of the challenges in terms of basically the popularity of programs like Move More, Eat Well, and amplifying prevention. There's reference in there to the support for communities and families around homelessness, which is really important, and reference to income opportunities that we're looking at for our arts and culture services. So this is Art Central Gallery and the Pavilion to make sure we're able to keep that provision accessible. And then under Objective 4, it's making reference to some of the procurement stuff we're doing in our libraries towards decarbonisation. Under emerging areas of development and activity, the big one, which you've heard already tonight, is around supporting schools with their deficit budgets and budget recovery plans as much as we can. We have reference under Objective 2 around, again, you will have heard this multiple times, but the implementation of the ALN Act and the requirements and duties both on us as a local authority and schools as well. Making sure we have effective use of things like our PDG grant, Pupil Development Grant, and working with partners like the CSC to make sure that those needs are being met in schools appropriately. Under Objective 3, I guess the big one to pick out there, there's reference there I haven't mentioned around child-friendly policies. So making sure that the information and policies that we develop, both within learning and skills, but wider as a culture, as a council, are accessible to our 26,000 kids in schools who need to help shape those policies and who are directly affected by the decisions we make. So ensuring that they're able to read, understand, and contribute to the development of those policies is a key objective for us. And then under Objective 4, again, looking at decarbonisation around learning and skills estate. So not just the new school builds, but what do we do with our existing schools? How do we invest and support with some of these programs for Victorian schools and schools that have been around for a number of years now? And then under areas of concern, under Objective 1, so there's reference to seldom heard groups. It links into the point I just made about child-friendly policies, but we do have those seldom heard voices across our school estate, which we need to make sure are brought to the forefront and are able to feed in so we can support them appropriately. There's reference in there around recruitment and retention challenges. Again, that's a theme in our ADP right at the top. In terms of resilience as an organisation, there's reference there for youth service, for example, but it's consistent across learning and skills. It's really challenging in schools as well. Under Objective 2, areas of concern, so there's reference in terms of ensuring how we're able to continue driving school improvement and working with our partners, conscious of the context and challenges that we have currently, and how do we mitigate some of the changes in funding. So there's reference there to, for example, the whole school approach grant, which wasn't increased. It's something that we were expecting to increase, but of course plans change because of the way things are at the moment. So that's offering challenges in terms of how we extend some of our services like counselling. Attendance, you will have had a report on recently around that. It's an area of concern, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic, and making sure that kids are back into school and families are supported as well. So that remains a key area of focus. Under Objective 3, again, there's reference to well-being and the growing demand that we have for social, emotional, and mental health services, which at the moment are outstripping our capacity and within resources. So having to think creatively, one, in terms of what we're able to do to mitigate that, but two, where we aren't able to mitigate that, what are the impacts going to be and how are we going to cope with those longer term? That's a really difficult one, and we haven't got an answer for that yet. And then the last one, objective 4, around the environment. So one of the key issues, and I think Dem or Vicky mentioned it earlier, the increasing costs around supply. We're seeing that with transport. We're seeing that with anything to do with construction and building. That presents a really big challenge for us, as well as a number of our older schools, Victorian and listed schools, for example. That limits our ability in terms of what we're able to do for things like decarbonization. But then there's also other expenses with some of those buildings because of their nature. So that's a whistle-stop tour. Over to you.
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation, Trevor. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Marshalsea.
I'm just looking at your objectives. So I'm just looking at objective 2. You mentioned the SPF funding used to engage with young people with learning disabilities, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about this. Sounds interesting. Is this in school, in college? What age are the pupils? How's the project work?
So the SPF funding is the Shared Prosperity Fund, which we get. So this has gone to ACL, for example. So working with some of the support for those who need help in putting CVs together, resumes together, or gaining skills and qualifications to get them into work. So some of the programs that we've been able to offer through ACL have been funded or part funded from that, as well as support for engagement with young people as well. So basically offering them the opportunity to come in to talk through what the opportunities are, to help them get onto courses and to get those qualifications, and to help them get jobs and secure employment. So it's contributed to materials and staffing costs to be able to do some of that work.
Thank you, Naomi. Any other questions? Naomi, if you want to come back in.
Going on, thank you for that, Trevor. It was really helpful. Going to objective 3, you're talking about homelessness project. Is this for individual young people who are homeless, or is this children within families that are homeless? And can you just tell me where it was and tell me a bit more about it?
I'm clicking the wrong button. The honest answer to that is I haven't got that detail in front of me to give you a specific answer. It's not my area of expertise at the moment. From what I understand, it relates to supporting those families as opposed to individuals, to give them some security in finding accommodation. But I can certainly find out and get the officers to drop you a line.
Yeah, it just sounds interesting. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you both. I just had one query, Trevor. Objective 1 in the areas for improvement, talking about the delay in the special school funding formula. I was just wondering what the timescales were in that delay, and if it's had any substantive knock-on effect.
So part of that delay is changes in staffing. The good news for us, I suppose, is there's reference there to our finance manager being on secondment. Our finance manager has a wealth of expertise and is currently supporting Welsh Government in understanding how school funding formulas work in principle, and how that works for all LAs across the country. So that's really positive. It was a delay in terms of getting some additional support in to help take that piece of work forward, and that's being done through the budget forum and a budget forum subgroup. So a lot of work has taken place on that, and progress is good now.
Great, thank you, Trevor. Any other queries? None that I can see, so thank you for the presentation, Trevor.
No worries.
So in that case, if there's no other questions, I move that we note the recommendations, which includes our consideration of the Q2 results.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hennessy. So that's the end of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt. Can I just check that you're moving and seconding both of the recommendations as per the report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I'd just like to finish by thanking Liz and the Democratic team for all the hard work they put in for the committee and supporting committee members in 2023. I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and see you on January 11th for our next meeting. Thank you.